Are you curious about bodies, pleasure, and possibilities? And what about curious about what others are up to on the planet when it comes to pleasure, sex, and play? Have you considered what pleasure can do for your life, your body, and your bank account? Do you know something magical, delightful, and out of this world orgasmic is not only possible for you, but totally available to you? If you're ready to be the magical, sexual, sexy beast you know you can be, and you just need the tools to get there, you're in the right place. Now, here's the host of The Pleasure Zone, sensual movement artist, relationship and sex alchemist, Milica Jelenic.
Welcome, my sweet pleasure seekers. This is officially my first day into my 11th year of having the Pleasure Zone. And I don't know if I ever told this story, but when I was asked to have a show on what's now Inspired Choices Network, at the time I was asked to come up with a title for branding for my show. And I probably sat on that for a week and I was like, show, what do you want to be called? And I was sweeping my back porch and the title came to me. So the Pleasure Zone came, and in thanks to divine inspiration that popped in while sweeping. You never know what you're going to get while you're sweeping. So I'm grateful for the divine intervention. I'm grateful for the sweeping, and it all came together and got the Pleasure Zone that has been going on for over 10 years. We're in the 11th year, where I have talked about topics, everything ranging from things historical, psychological, biological, health, nutrition, had guests on, have had amazing guests on. If you didn't listen to my show last week where we did the 10-year celebration, talking about some of my favorite guests and some of the stranger topics that I've had, go back and listen to that. It gives you some ideas of things that you can find and look for and listen to in and on through the Pleasure Zone. So one of the topics that I sometimes bring up, but I don't necessarily, I don't think I've actually ever done an entire episode on the concept of obligation sex. So we'll be talking about that today. One of the things that I do in my regular life is I work with couples with sex and intimacy for coaching, as well as individuals, but I also am a holistic health practitioner, and I use a lot of different modalities to help have more of a holistic approach to your health, your well-being, your life, all of that. So one of the things that I have heard people talk about in relationship is this idea of, I have to have sex with my partner because we're married, we're long-term, we're committed to each other. So there's this obligation sex. Just the thought of it, isn't it daunting? Oy vey, I don't want it. So for those of you who are wondering what is obligation sex, I'm going to give you a list of a few things that I would say count as obligation sex. And the chances are somewhere in your life, you might have had obligation sex and didn't even know that you were doing that. You might not have termed it that way. So we're going to talk about obligation sex. We're going to talk about some of the things to notice and look for. If you feel like you're having obligation sex, notice and look for some things in yourself. How are you reacting to this? What can you do to change it? And also, there's this understanding, or I don't know if it's a really understanding. I don't know how else to put it. I think it's a misguided interpretation that women, so AFAB, assigned female at birth, are the only ones who feel an obligation to sex. And I have to say that's not true. And some of you are like, no, all men want sex all the time. No, they don't. And some men feel like they're obligated, and the energy can come across as well. If there's pressure, if in the relationship, and also there's all kinds of different dynamics in relationships. We're not just talking about heterosexual relationships. So there are times when obligation sex can be not just AFAB, assigned female at birth, women thinking that they're obligated to have sex with their partner. It could be anybody. So we're going to keep this very general, although I know there is sort of this misunderstanding that It's just women who feel obligated. Actually, there was a statistics done by somebody who wrote a book, and the book is, I think it's called Great. I'm going to just check the title of that because I literally just looked this book up. And one of the stats in this book, it's called the Great Sex Rescue. And the Great Sex Rescue is written by Sheila Ray Gregory, something like that, and Joanna Sowetsky. And they, I think I'm saying their names right or wrong, it's hard to say, but some of the studies that were done in there, or that they drew from, show that that at the time of marriage, 39% of women who were interviewed out of the 20,000 people that were interviewed said that they felt obligated to have sex because they were married. And then later on in their marriage, went down to 21%, where men have an obligation 24% of the time, and it kind of remained the same before, during, and after for men. So for women, it seemed to change over time, but and it probably is also over age, and different factors could be involved. I don't know how many factors they looked at because I haven't read that book yet. But one of the factors I think that would be involved is if you're having obligation sex because you think you need to have a baby, and that could be a lot of pressure, that can, once you have the child, then the obligation sex might go down, go out the door. So if you are the one getting pregnant, you might feel the obligation to have that sex. So just the word obligation itself is so daunting. So I would like you to consider that in your opinion, actually, let's look at it this way. In your opinion, what's the opposite of obligation? So for me, the opposite of obligation is choice. And if you're feeling like you have choice in your relationship, how much does that open up all the different things you can do? The play, the connection, the feelings, even the being allowed to either be turned on or not turned on, or taking your time to be able to have foreplay, all of that stuff. When you're having sex from a place of choice, it's a lot different than obligation sex. So obligation sex also can come in. I was saying that a lot of the stuff that I was reading, and I think a lot of the articles have been written about, ladies, what do you do when you feel obligated to have sex with your husband? I hadn't really noticed any articles that said, hey guys, what do you do when you feel obligated to have sex with your wife? And one of the things I wanted to mention is that this does happen in relationships when, there's fertility involved, and there's that obligation sex for, I've got 14 minutes where I'm really fertile, so we have to do it now. Well, the guy could have just gotten home from work and he has just no desire to do that. And that obligation sex can lead to lack of performance, lack of desire, lack of interest. It can lead to resentment. It can lead to so many things that create issues that it's so daunting. So I just wanted to really be clear that I do not think this is only a women's only issue about obligation. And in this sense too, it's not assigned to any sex or gender. It's that people will feel obligated for various reasons. So there are a lot of different varying, I would say, they're varying, not as in there's not exactly the same wording for what is obligation sex. And one of the simplest ways to put it is that it's that you feel like you have to have sex with your partner. So it's another way to put it is that it's your duty. So in some religions, belief systems, cults, there is a idea that you have a duty to your partner to have sex with them. And it's more, rather than having desire or feeling turned on or excited by your partner, it's your duty. You have to, whether you like it or not. I have a friend that I worked with years and years and years ago. And at one point I had said something to her because she was really frustrated and upset, and I don't know if she listens to my show or not, but I can't say it. And I'm not going to name her just in case she does. But at the time when I knew her, she felt like she was obligated to have sex with her husband every day they were married. And she didn't enjoy it, and she didn't enjoy being with him. So if she didn't have sex with him, she either had to give him oral or give him a hand job, because he refused to masturbate himself. So he was an interesting character. I would say that he probably was doing other things in that house. He had some daughters, and I was always a little weary of what he would be doing with them. Anyway, that's a side note. But he had this strong thing about he had to. And so I had said to her once, like, you don't have to have sex with your husband. Just because you're married, you still have choice. That kind of blew her mind. She wasn't raised to believe that, and it wasn't in her scope of reality. And at that point, I think she'd been married about 20 years. So now she'd been married like 40. So the obligation sex, the one day that she refused him, he actually got physical with her, and she came to work bruised the next day. And I thought, oh my God, I thought I empowered this woman, and what I ended up feeling like was that I sent her into a cave with a madman. So if somebody is doing something like that, where you have to have sex or you get harmed physically, emotionally, mentally, verbally, any of those things, get out. That means you don't have any choice. And if you don't have any choice, it leans to the edge of, and I would say it's not even the edge, I would say it's right in there, but some people would say it leans to the edge of abuse, and it is abuse to me. That if you can't say no to your partner for anything, then there's a control dynamic going on. There's like a power dynamic going on that's unhealthy, unless for some reason you guys are into BDSM and you have this all agreed on, and it's all consensual non-consent. That's a different story, but that's often not the case. This is obligation sex that is like, if you don't do it, you're not doing your duty as a wife. And I thought, well, this is a really interesting dynamic to have, because so many people who are in these roles, positions, didn't know any different, because they were told that your duty as a wife, your duty as a husband, we're going to religions that believe that you should not have premarital sex. So we're assuming they waited until they got married, and then they're obligated to have sex whenever their partner demands it, however many times their partner demands it, even if they aren't having fun or enjoying it, because really what you're being used as is some kind of sex toy. So whether you're being used as a dildo or whether you're being used as a masturbation sleeve, either way, you're pretty much just there for the person to get off, and your body is just a tool. It has nothing to do with connection or feeling any kind of sense of joy or pleasure or desire. That is awful. I feel for you guys. If you are going through a situation where you are stuck in a relationship having obligation sex and you're not sure how to get out of that relationship because maybe there's a lot of entanglements, it's always good to get into a conversation with somebody who can walk you through how to get out safely. And there are lots of people who can do that, whether that's a free helpline or whether that's, calling one of the people on Inspired Choices Network, setting up an appointment for some coaching, relationship coaching, or anything like that, and finding out how you can start to empower yourself so that you can make a choice and know that you are not and never have been obligated to have sex with anybody ever. I want to be really clear on that. It doesn't matter what your status is. It doesn't matter if your partner says that you owe them. You don't. And there are a lot of scenarios where that comes up, and we will be talking about some of the scenarios that I know my generation heard a lot of, and the generations before me heard a lot about. You're obligated because this, that, and the other. And it was even premarital sex related. So it had nothing to do with you're obligated because you're married. Now that's one of the biggest ones. You're obligated for religious purposes because, one paragraph in the Bible says that your duty as husband or your duty as wife is to do A, B, and C. And at no point, does it say there's choice, but I really don't think that a loving God would make you want to feel violated every day of your life. I really just don't think a loving God feels that way. That's just my take on it. So we're going to look at some of the reasons why people have been convinced into sex, which has become obligation sex, which to me verges on the edge of abuse and actually is a form of abuse because it's coercion. So we will talk about that. Coercion, obligation, they're kind of the same. And what you can do to empower yourself so that you don't have to be in situations where you feel obligated to have sex with people. Sometimes it's a healing journey. It's often a healing journey. So we'll talk about that when we come back. You're listening to The Pleasure Zone here on Inspired Choices Network, and we'll be right back after this commercial.
Are you secretly a voyeur, wondering what's going on in other people's sex lives? What if now is the time for a totally different sexual evolution? Are you interested in people who are pioneers of different sexual and pleasurable practices? Lean in now with Milica Jelenic, where she will entice you and your body to know your own pleasure zone. On the Pleasure Zone radio show with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic, you'll receive tools, inspiration, and a foundation to allow yourself to receive more in your sex life, and quite possibly other areas of your life as well. Listen for The Pleasure Zone with Milica every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 5 p.m. Pacific Time on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com.
Are you a subject matter expert? Are you here to share your expertise with an audience waiting to hear from you in only the way you can deliver? Are you ready to have your voice amplified across the airwaves? Inspired Choices Network has a global radio platform streaming to millions of people across the world. Professionally produced and supported by an accomplished team every step of the way, you can broadcast from anywhere in the world, knowing your voice matters, and we ensure it is delivered with ease and efficiency. Eager to hear your message, the world awaits. Contact us today to become an Inspired Choices Network radio host. Email become a host at inspiredchoicesnetwork.com.
This is The Pleasure Zone with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic. To participate in the program today, join our live studio audience in our chat room at inspiredchoicesnetwork.com. You can also make the choice to ask or comment by email, info@milicajelenic.com. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back, my sweet pleasure seekers. Today we're talking about obligation sex. To me, it's an important topic because it can often lead to the feeling of being traumatized repeatedly. It can feel like abuse, and all of those are valid and true. So if you've experienced in your life the feeling of that you're obligated to have sex and your body is maybe just only responding because it's having, there's friction on your clitoris. So your clitoris responds because it's a biological response, but there's no emotional connection. There's nothing else going on. So arousal does not equal consent, right? We know that from lots of shows. We've talked about that a lot. Arousal does not equal consent. So sometimes in obligation sex, your body will go into arousal because there's a nervous system, there's things, you might not feel turned on at all, but next thing you know, you're wet or you have an erection or whatever's going on, your genitals are responding and you're like, why? I'm not interested. And then if you say that to your partner, they're going to think you're a liar because they're like, well, I see that you are because look, there's proof. Well, no, what there's proof of is that there's body parts that got stimulated, but that doesn't mean that they were the body parts got aroused, but it doesn't mean you were emotionally or physically feeling connected to the person. Your body is just aroused. Just like if you stuck your finger into a fire, you have a reaction. Doesn't mean you are like, yay, I'm going to do that again, stick my finger in the fire. No, it's just your body's having a reaction to stimuli. So bodies have reactions to stimuli. That's what they do. So it's one of their things, and I say that with that because it's such it can be such a bone of contention for people where they're like, they see that their partner is aroused because they see physical evidence, right? It's like you can look at a penis and see it get erect, and that's supposed to be physical evidence that your partner is ready and connected and aroused. No, it just means that their body is showing signs of arousal, but that doesn't mean they're ready or interested. I know that seems confusing, but arousal does not equal consent. So when you have, or you're in a partnership with somebody and they are resisting having sex with you, and they say something to the effect of, well, I just feel like we have to have sex and it's not fun, but it's like, I have to have sex with you because you're my partner, but I don't like it, but I'm fine if I have to. And I don't know how that makes you feel. Maybe, you're a narcissist and you don't care and all it's about you anyway. So it doesn't really matter as long as you get what you want, how you want it. Been with the narcissist or two. And that is not fun. That is one of the least fun, want to vomit kind of situations you can get in. When you're actually with somebody who cares if you are aroused mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, it can actually open your life up and you feel so much better about yourself, so much better about your connection. And you might actually not only enjoy sex, but desire having more of it. So if you're having obligation sex, what are some of the reasons you're doing this? Are you competing with the Joneses next door because you heard they have sex 3 times a day, or you literally are hearing them have sex 3 times, 5 times, 20 times a day? Are you, doing this because it's a religious obligation, that it's your duty, you're supposed to? Is it because you're trying to have children? Is it because, are you having obligation sex because the person said to you, well, I took you out to dinner, so I thought I would at least get something. Now, that's a real common one from the 80s and 90s, kids, for those of you listening, and you remember those situations where you'd go out and there would be the date and somebody would pay for something, and then all of a sudden that $20 excursion equaled your obligation to have sex. You were never obligated to have sex. And the other obligation, there's another doozy, is, well, you turned me on, so now I'm going to be blue-balled. I can't even tell you how many dudes threw that one at me in my life. You blue-balled me. I don't think you're going to die from that, buddy, but nice try. The blue-balled excuse is, yes, I suppose you could have long-lasting issues, but you do have your own hand. Go take care of your business, not obligated to fulfill your needs. Just as much as those same guys are always, I have to say, always the ones who would, in the middle of sex, just do their duty and they're done, and for themselves, and leave you high and dry. So as much as you can get blue-balled, you can also have congestion in your vulva, and you can have, whether it's vaginal congestion or vulvar congestion, it can create pain and scar tissue-like situations and all kinds of issues that also like pain in a way that you actually don't want to have sex in the future. So as much as dudes, you think you get blue-balled, you know what? Penis havers can get blue-balled. Also, can those of us with vulvas also have similar and more commonly congestion in the vulva? So I don't ever hear of women saying, oh my God, you did it. No, because we don't use those terms usually. But I think there's more conversation coming where there is a need for it to be mutual, where everybody's enjoying the sex. So the obligation part of you have to do your duty and make your man happy. You have to do your duty or he's going to run away from you and he's going to go find somebody else to have sex with. And I can't tell you how many women I know who, when a dude will threaten that, well, if you don't have sex with me, I'm going to go have sex with somebody else. Okay, go right ahead, but don't come back to me. Oh, whoa, what? Fine then. Oh. There's usually that. I'm actually imitating somebody in specific, so I hope they're listening. Cheers to you, Jackwad. Anyway, they should know who they are because referencing a narcissist, alcoholic, blah, blah, blah. I won't give too many more references to be too specific. All right. So if you're in situations like that, I want you to first learn it's a really big and important word. And it's going to be like one of those words where you might have to hear it a few times till it sinks in, because it could be so foreign to your vocabulary that you just don't use it. It's a big one. It's no. Yeah, I know. N-O, complete sentence. You do not and never have had to have sex with anybody ever. You are not royalty, and even the royals are not obligated to have sex. They used to be having to prove that they would, have sex to show that they were virgins and they were going to sire the next, royal child, blah, blah, blah. And you'd have witnesses to all of this to make sure that the wedding was, the marriage was consecrated and everything was valid. So you'd have your witnesses to sex. So yes, some of those things have carried through, and, hopefully we don't have those situations left on the planet so much anymore, although I'm sure there are cultures where that still does exist. And I'm sure there are perverts who still do that just because they think it's fun, even though their partner might not consent to it. Again, that's non-consensual. That is a violation, just like obligation and coercion are a violation. So if you think that your coercion or your manipulation is sexy and hot and fun, you suck. Now, if you're into playful sex where you have agreed with your partner that you're, playing with, non-consensual consent, more in the kink arena, that's a different story. But if you're not agreed that you're playing in the kink arena and you play obligation sex with your partner and guilt and all that, and then when they call you out on it, you're like, well, I was just joking. No, you weren't. You're an ass. It's just really simple. So there are a lot of people out there who are just plain old rude. And when it comes to sex, they somehow turn and ramp up their rudeness, and it just gets worse. So if you have a partner who is saying that they feel obligated to have sex with you and they're not liking it, but they're willing to have a conversation about it, then there is room for healing. If your partner is saying that they are tired of having to feel obligated to have sex with you and they're not interested in resolving that, then there is no room for discussion. And in fact, your relationship is over. Because if you are the one insisting that this has to be part of the relationship, it's your deal break. It's like a deal breaker for you. If that doesn't happen, then you're out. Well, if your partner doesn't provide that, guess what? It's over. So you got to know what are your deal breakers? What are your deal makers? If obligation sex is something you have to have the sex whether you want it or not cool. It's always a choice. Having sex for pleasure is even better. If you were having sex for pleasure once a year, it's better than having obligation sex every freaking day of your life. So remember to enjoy your partner while you're with them. And, whether it's once a year or whether it's once a week or once a day, there's no obligation. if you are playing from that game, and if you are using biblical quotes to say what, your partner's duty is to you, and it's interesting, I think the wording is that the wife's duty is to have sex with the husband, but the husband is responsible for her. It's not the same. So he needs to have an ability to respond, which in this case with sex, an ability to respond is to have an erection. That's his job. Her job is to do the duty of making sure that she can get pregnant through that sex. So not a lot of, that's kind of really fundamental, more maybe evangelical, I'm not sure, kind of fundamentalist style Christian thoughts on that. I have to say that that's because that's where the writings and the articles that I read came from. And interestingly, I've looked at it from different perspectives, and I've looked at it too from my grandparents. So I don't know why my dad knew all this stuff about my grandparents, but my grandmother and grandfather were Nazarenes. So they're kind of like, they're Anabaptists, or they're in the family of like Mennonites and Amish and that sort of thing, but they were a little bit more modern. And my grandmother just was like, she didn't have I always thought she had obligation sex, because it was just like, she always wore like a kerchief and wore dark clothes, and she looked like, she was doing everything out of obligation. But in fact, she was a little horn dog and loved sex. So I thought that was really cool when I found that out. In fact, she got kicked out of her parents' house because, well, she was married to my grandfather and they had one child already, but my grandmother couldn't keep her hands off my grandpa, and I guess her mother was tired of it, so she kicked them out and they had to find their own home. So even in situations like that, where you look at somebody and you think, oh, they must have had some really boring sex, or like, obligation sex, that must have been their thing because they're so religious. That's not always true. Sometimes you'll find some pretty secret, horny little people in those communities that actually really enjoy each other, which is really cool. And so we're going to talk about a few more things when it comes to obligation sex. How can we turn this around? Guys, I don't want to feel obligated anymore. And how can we? I don't actually, but I have in the past, so I know how to turn it around. And we're going to also talk about some of the things that, from recovery. If you've gone through obligation sex and your body is kind of reeling from it or still healing from it, then let's talk about some things on the recovery mode as well. So we're going to talk all about that when we come back from this commercial break. You're listening to The Pleasure Zone here on Inspired Choices Network, and we'll be right back after this commercial.
Are you secretly a voyeur, wondering what's going on in other people's sex lives? What if now is the time for a totally different sexual evolution? Are you interested in people who are pioneers of different sexual and pleasurable practices? Lean in now with Milica Jelenic, where she will entice you and your body to know your own pleasure zone. On the Pleasure Zone radio show with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic, you'll receive tools, inspiration, and a foundation to allow yourself to receive more in your sex life, and quite possibly other areas of your life as well. Listen for The Pleasure Zone with Milica every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 5 p.m. Pacific Time on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com.
Interested in masturbating for money, copulating for consciousness, and pleasuring on purpose? 21 Days of Sexual Magicism with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic is an exploration of tools, processes, and actions that you can use to create more for your life, your body, your money inflows, and so much more. Graduated learning for all levels of interest. Learn at your own pace via video classes or join the yearly live class. Take a peek at www.milicajelenic.com.
How wonderful would it be to carry your favorite Inspired Choices Network host with you throughout your day? Well, now you can. Inspired Choices Network now has its very own mobile app. Our free app offers live streaming shows, along with thousands of podcasts and TV episodes. Our shows cover a wide variety of topics. Whether you're waking up with us, carrying us through the day, and taking us to bed with you, we're always here for you to enjoy. We're easy to find. Just search for Inspired Choices Network in the Apple App Store or Google Play Store.
This is The Pleasure Zone with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic. To participate in the program today, join our live studio audience in our chat room at inspiredchoicesnetwork.com. You can also make the choice to ask or comment by email, info@milicajelenic.com. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back, my sweet pleasure seekers. For those of you who are listening tonight and you're like, oh man, I'm so in the obligation sex and I'm not having fun with this. If you'd like to hop on a call with me, I offer 30 minutes for free to anybody who has the gumption and the tenacity to pick up their, well, not really. You can go over to my website, milicajelenic.com. You don't have to pick anything up. milicajelenic.com, and there's a book now link. You can book a conversation with me and we can go through some of the things that maybe you're going through and see if I could be a fit for you for coaching, if that's something that you desire. So obligation sex, I think sometimes what happens in relationships, if it's really long gone, like the story I was telling about, 20 years in, they're probably still married, haven't spoken to her in a long time, but 40 years in, if they're still having obligation sex, what's going to happen? There's going to be resentments, there's going to be anger. The body is going to respond with sometimes illness, and sometimes the body responds in ways that prevents you from actually having sex. So there could be things like, oh, guess what? Now you have vulvar cancer. Now you have, cervical cancer. You have uterine cancer. You've got vaginal cancer. Oh, guess what? You don't have any body parts to have sex with anymore. Oh, look, now you got breast cancer. Oh, look, those are gone too. All your play toys are gone. So, or you got funk. Maybe you got necrotizing tissues in your body and you can't have sex. So your body will revolt and become revolting in a way. And it will make it so that, at some point you will have to say no or stand up for yourself. So how about before it comes to that kind of level of sickness or illness in your body, you stand up for yourself and you speak up for what you want. So if you're feeling like you're having obligation sex and your partner is good enough at communicating that you can start a conversation and say, you know what, I've been feeling like lately our sex is kind of drab and kind of out of obligation, and I'd like to at least feel connected and try something new, try some fun. What do you think? And see how they respond. Sometimes what you'll get is, oh no, everything's fine, I'm fine. And that's when you have to step up and say, okay, I'm glad it's fine for you, but for me, there's something lacking and I really need something new. Are you willing to work with me on this? So sometimes it's the simplest thing of maybe you just need some new moves. Maybe you just need to have some, more core play. Core play is foreplay. So maybe you need some more core play and some more ideas around core play. Maybe you need a little kink. Maybe you need a little tantra. Maybe you need something different in order to feel connected to your partner and that you have choice, that you're being heard as well. So remember those 3 C's that we talk a lot about is curiosity, consent, and what's that other one? Yeah, curiosity and consent are top 2 coming to my mind right now. Choice, of course, is another C word, and curiosity and consent are usually top notch in communication. Yes, super key. Those are my top fun ones. So thank you for helping me on that one. But yeah, so when we look at those key elements, we need to be able to have communication with our partners in order to have the conversation, that you can get consent, that you can get curious. So one of the ways that if you are going to try and resolve this and get out of obligation sex, I'm going to give you two scenarios. So the scenario of you're trying to get pregnant, and so you're having obligation sex at certain times of the day, certain, have to right now because this is when I'm most fertile. Guys, that is so stressful. Your chances of conceiving are so low. Your hormones are going to be so out of whack from just trying to make it happen. And the resentment will build so much that by the time you actually have that child, there is going to be such a big disconnection between the two of you that nothing's going to fly. You want to put all that timing of the perfect timing of sex away and connect with your partner and let it go, because the obligation sex is going to create a real funky energy when having a kid. And then what are you going to do? Bring that obligation stuff forward and, have each other obligated to each other for life now for other things? Oh, the resentments, they tumbleweed, guys. They just tumbleweed. So pull back. If you're doing that out of having a child, pull back, find other ways or timings called, hey, we're both interested. Let's do it now. Your body knows. And find ways to really nurture each other's bodies in a loving, sexy, fun way for you guys, which can be different for everybody. Maybe you need massages. Maybe it's time to look into your erotic blueprint and find out what your erotic blueprint is. So if you're not sure what that is, you can look up Jaya, and she has a great method of figuring out what is your erotic blueprint. Play with that. Have some fun. You forgot the fun part in the F word. And there should be way more fun in having sex. There should be way more fun in making babies too, not out of obligation, guys. Not fun at all. So that's a lot of times a reason why people have obligation sex. And another reason is the duty, right? So if it's your duty to have sex with your partner and you're really not liking it, and maybe you don't even like your partner anymore because the resentments have built so much, it's time to get out and get yourselves a sex and intimacy coach like me, or a relationship coach. You can, find who relates for you. Maybe you need some ideas. Maybe you need a kink coach to help you find some new ways to work with each other. But you also need to resolve your own personal stuff too. So if you got things going on and resentments going on and you need to hash them out and figure out how to turn that around, you're going to need to start to get your own either coach or therapist or mindset, somebody to work with you on your mindset to flip things around. All of these are so important. So when you start to actually flip things around and you start to either take ownership of obligating the person or ownership of that you kept on agreeing even though you didn't want to, then you can start to realize maybe where that came from. And a lot of people who grew up in relationships, grew up in homes where you didn't feel safe, or you grew up with somebody who was an addict, or you grew up with a narcissist, or you grew up with any number of kind of mental health issues, you often would become the person who looked after everybody. And so what happens in that situation is that even in sex or relationships in general, like as you get married, then you'll just be doing things because you think you have to keep the peace, to make everybody happy. Don't rock the boat because you've seen what happens when people rock the boat. Maybe abuses happen, maybe people die, maybe they go to jail, maybe there's, the family breaks up. Like so many things could happen if you don't hold it together. Well, one of the things is to let go of that responsibility. Things fall apart and die anyway. And feeling like you have to do something to keep everybody happy is never going to work, because I don't know if you know this, but you're part of everybody. If you're not happy, then you can't make everybody happy because you're not happy. You're part of everybody. You're part of everybody, so you need to be happy too. And so what would bring you happiness? What would actually have you feel joy-filled? Can you say to your partner, no? And that is like, I know it's a really big sentence to play with and a really big concept. It's I'm not saying that sarcastically. It's huge. It's probably one of the hardest things to learn how to say if you've gone through any kind of abusive situation growing up, the ability to say no and stand up for yourself, and being able to say what you would like without feeling like you could get in trouble for everything. So being able to just say your piece and have a partner who can hear you. And, so both of you need to be on the healing track if you're going to move out of obligation sex, because whoever's obligating needs the work, and whoever is agreeing to the obligation also needs to do the work, whatever that is for you guys. So how do you turn it around is you got to first work on your mindset, and you got to communicate that you're feeling the obligation, work on the mindset, start to turn it around, start to look for some fun and play and experience on what it is that you would actually like to have. Would you like to have more deeper connection? And then you can start to explore the different avenues of different things that you'd actually like to have. So we'll talk more about that when we come back. You're listening to The Pleasure Zone here on Inspired Choices and Network, and we'll be right back after this commercial.
Are you secretly a voyeur, wondering what's going on in other people's sex lives? What if now is the time for a totally different sexual evolution? Are you interested in people who are pioneers of different sexual and pleasurable practices? Lean in now with Milica Jelenic, where she will entice you and your body to know your own pleasure zone. On the Pleasure Zone radio show with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic, you'll receive tools, inspiration, and a foundation to allow yourself to receive more in your sex life, and quite possibly other areas of your life as well. Listen for The Pleasure Zone with Milica every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 5 p.m. Pacific Time on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. This is The Pleasure Zone with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic. To participate in the program today, join our live studio audience in our chat room at InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. You can also make the choice to ask or comment by email, info@MilicaJelenic.com. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back, my sweet pleasure seekers. Tonight we are talking about obligation sex, that no fun sex, that who wants to have that. Although there are people out there who really love to be the obligators, they get off on it. And this is obligating people to have sex in a non-consensual way because they are actually like the power dynamic. Now, if you're obligating somebody to have sex with you, that you're a whole other category. But if you're obligating somebody to have sex with you and you don't like doing that, and you're like, I really don't want to have my partner to feel like they're obligated to have sex with me. I'd really like them to enjoy it. What can I do to stop this? Is do some self-discovery. So first of all, why are you feeling like you have to have sex when you don't want to? Because the chances are, if you actually care about your partner, if they don't want to have sex, the chances are you'd be okay not to have sex too. You might want to check in with them and go, is there something else you'd like to do? Because I just want to feel close to you right now. Could we hug instead? Could we maybe read a story to each other? Could we play games? Could we go for a walk? Could we go for a ride? Could we do something together? Just quality time. So if you're using sex, obligation sex, as one of your 5 love languages, that would be a detrimental version of a love language, to obligate somebody to have sex with you, in terms of touch, the touch love language. If you're obligating somebody, this is unkind. So if you're not wanting to do that and you're thinking, but I have to because I'm trying to save my marriage, and if I have sex, it's going to save my marriage, or if we have a child, it's going to save my marriage, or because my religion says I need to, we got to do this. Guys, none of that matters. All that matters is how you and your partner feel. Doesn't matter what it says in the Bible. It doesn't matter what it says in the Quran or the old, the Torah. It doesn't matter what Buddha says about it, or what Krishna says about it, or what anyone says about it. It matters what you and your partner feel about it. And if you are not okay with obligation sex, you need to talk about that. Maybe sex isn't for you guys in the traditional sense of what people think of when they think of sex, which is penetration. There is so much more to explore other than penetration. There is a world of fun out there that you're not even getting close to. You could have so much fun just reading each other fun erotic stories if you really are wanting to gear it into the sex zone. There are so many other things you can do, guys, instead of obligating each other to have sex. So if you really care about your partner, that's the number one thing to check is, do I care about my partner? Oh, I don't. I've just been trying to force them to have sex with me. What a disgusting human being I am. Oh my God. But if you know, coercion, not cool. If you're not an ass and you actually care about your partner, then what you might think about is, what belief systems led me to be like desiring to coerce my partner? What belief systems created this? Is this something that I've seen? Is this what my parents did? Is this what I was told religiously? Is this what I've seen on movies and porn? Where did I get this from? Is this even my thought? Like, do I even believe this? Probably not. And then you can start to unravel that. If you don't even believe that you need to have the sex as much as you thought you were having it, but you thought in order to have a good marriage, you need to have sex 3 times a day, or it's not a good marriage. No, what you need to have for a good marriage is, number one, communication, consent, curiosity, choice. Really, all those are important. So if you can communicate with your partner and your partner is satisfied with the amount of sex you're having and you're not satisfied, then you can ask for certain things. And maybe you can say, you know what? You also need to decipher, is it the amount of sex you're having that you're not satisfied with? Is it the kind? Do you need more fun? Do you need more play? And then if you need to have some coaching on that to understand, like, what is it about the sex that's not working? You know, for one partner, they might be like, it's fine, I'm good. Like, this is all I need. But the other partner might be like, actually, I need some of this and that and that. So you need to have the conversation and see if your partner is willing to work with you on that, right? So communication helps in order to have these conversations so that you can negotiate some terms of agreement, terms of engagement, right? So when you can reach some new ideas, new experiences, sometimes it's like a one and done. Sometimes you're just like, you know what, I need to try A once in my life. Can we try that? And your partner's like, yeah, sure. And it's like, okay, if I really like A, do you think we could do that again? Sure, let's do that again. Or they might be like, yeah, I could do that once, but I can't do that again. You got to find out if that's a deal breaker for you. So there may be times where that the sex is so important to you, but your partner cannot be the person to deliver it. Then you got to negotiate whether you're going to have an open marriage, whether you're going to get divorced, whether you're going to, you know, be friends. There's a whole lot of choices you can have on that. But your relationship dynamic will have to change because whatever you were doing won't be working for you anymore. So you'll need to have a discussion on whether you're breaking up, opening the marriage, doing whatever you're doing, and going from there. Obligation sex can absolutely lead to, not, I was just saying like the emotional stuff, like the resentments and all that. And I also did mention the health stuff. It can also help you, like if you're help you, it can definitely help to make you feel disconnected. Not that that's helping, but it can impact in a lot of negative ways. So you can start to have low self-esteem. You can feel not just about like, you know, who you are as a person, about your body. You can start to resent other people. You could resent not just the person doing that, but you could end up resenting their whole family and your own life. You could resent your own children. You, like, the resentments can build. You really need to work on that out. So obligation sex can create a lot of problems in relationships, and it's really important to have discussions to move through that, to make some agreements. Sometimes you need to schedule sex, which is fine. And it doesn't mean that you're going to have sex, but it means that you schedule the time to be together for the possibility of that. That's a little different for people who have really busy schedules, but that's not that you're obligated. So I just felt like some people might be like, what about scheduling sex? Well, sometimes, but that can also get sticky and messy at times too. And then resentments can kick in. If you have the ability to not have to schedule sex, that's great. Do it when your bodies both agree to it and when you feel connected, and do things to feel connected. Really important. So try that for the next week. Stay tuned in and turn.
Thank you for listening to The Pleasure Zone with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic. The Pleasure Zone returns next Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Mountain, and 5 p.m. Pacific on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. We hope you'll join us. Until then, have the best week of your life by choosing to be turned on and tuned in to your body.